Managing soil erosion from croplands. The first thing we need to ask ourselves is, what is soil erosion? And soil erosion is the removal and transportation of soil from the Earth's surface by the agents of soil erosion. In this case, the agents being water and wind, which is assisted by gravity, solar energy, and rock weathering. There are three distinct phases of soil erosion. The first phase, which is known as particle detachment. The second phase is known as sediment transportation. And the third phase is known as sedimentation. There are different types of soil erosion. And there's one known as splash erosion, where the raindrop hits the surface of the soil and detaches the particle from the surface. The water then transports this particle down slope, as you can see here, in a sheet, and that's why it's called sheet erosion. Then because of the particle moving across the surface and eroding the surface, you have what you call rill, the formation of rills, or this is what's known as rill erosion. And then when the rill gets bigger, or the crater gets bigger, then it's known as gully erosion. Stream bank erosion, however, is when the water in the river or the stream actually erodes the bank of the river, causing soil particles to be deposited in the water and eventually lead to sedimentation. There are four principal factors affecting soil erosion. The first factor is known as soil characteristics. In this context, it's known as soil texture, soil organic matter, structure, and chemistry. The second factor is known as vegetative cover, with respect to the type of vegetation that is being used. And the third factor is known as topography, in terms of the shape and slope characteristics. And the fourth and last factor, which is the most important factor, which is known as climate, with respect to rainfall intensity and duration. Looking at agriculture today, we have converted 38% of the Earth's surface for agriculture, the practice of cultivating soil, producing crops, and raising livestock for human use and consumption. Croplands is essentially used for growing plant crops, and rangelands are used for grazing animal livestock. All depend on the health of the soil. Soil erosion, however, is a global problem. A third of this world's arable land since 1950 has been prone to soil erosion, most of this occurring in Asia, Africa, South America, and the Caribbean. However, looking in the context of the Caribbean, 90% of the Caribbean cropland is already losing soil faster than it's being replaced. To give you a global aspect of the intensity or the severity of soil erosion, again, looking at the orange color and the red color, looking across the globe, you can see that the areas of some concern and the areas of serious concern mainly occurs in Central and parts of North America, South America, Africa, and the majority being in the continent of Europe as well as Australia. Looking at some figures, again, by continent, you have on the y-axis the total area with degraded soil represented by percent, and on the x-axis you have the different continents. And what you can see here is that, again, Europe has a higher erosion rate as compared to other continents such as Africa, Asia, North America, and South America. It's important to note, however, that Europe's land is more degradable because of its long history of intensive agriculture, but Asia's and Africa's soils are becoming eroded very, very quickly. Looking again at the type of soil erosion again, wind erosion accounts for 41.8% of the soil erosion across the world. Water erosion accounts for 45.2%. In relation to soil structure problems, 3.4% is what causes soil erosion. And then you have the chemical problems, which is Looking at the major causes, just touching back just to show you it in a graphic sense, in a more appealing sense, is that industrialization is just 1% of one of the reasons why soil erosion occurs. Overgrazing contributes to 34% of the soil erosion, overexploitation 7%, cropland agriculture 28%, and deforestation 30%. Most of the soil degradation is caused, however, by livestock overgrazing, deforestation, and cropland agriculture. Now, there are very different types of agriculture. We have industrialized agriculture, we have plantation agriculture, we have traditional subsistence agriculture, and we have traditional intensive agriculture, all of which contribute to the problem of soil erosion. So issues of soil erosion. One issue is that waste runoff increases nutrients and pathogens and actually introduce them into the stream, which can cause severe problems to livestock or human beings living further down the stream. Another issue with soil erosion is the issue of overgrazing, where overgrazing strips the land of any natural protection and leaves the soil susceptible to wind and water erosion. So again, the soil will be bare as possible. As soon as wind and water actually hits the soil, it becomes eroded at a much faster rate as compared to if there was a soil cover present. Taking one step further, looking at the overgrazing problem, is just a graph or a flow chart just to show you what happens. So overgrazing compacts the soil and damages the soil structure, and this has three main effects. Right, the first effect is decrease the water infiltration. The second effect is a decrease the aeration of the soil. And the third effect is that it allows invasive species to gain a foothold and compete or outcompete natives in the altered environment. And as a result of all these three aspects here, it decreases grass growth and survival. Now, overgrazing can also happen in the context of removing native grasses. And again, what this does is that it exposes the bare topsoil, and then you have wind and water erosion taking place, causing a decreased grass and growth and survival. In terms of runoff, which is another issue with soil erosion, is that runoff actually carries sediments, nutrients, and pesticides into the streams, and this can damage the ecosystem severely. The question we have to ask ourselves now is, how do we prevent soil degradation? And there are many farming strategies out there that could help prevent soil degradation and soil erosion. And the first one is crop rotation. The second one is contour farming. The third is intercropping. The fourth is terracing. The fifth is shelter belts. And the last one is conservation tillage. So we're going to touch on these very, very briefly to give you an idea what it is and what are the main advantages of each of these techniques that are being used. And the first technique that we're going to look at is crop rotation. And crop rotation is essentially alternating the crop planted, for example, between corn and soybeans, which can restore nutrients to soil and fight pests and diseases as well. And there are many, many advantages of using the process of crop rotation or the strategy of crop rotation. And the first advantage is that it maintains the soil fertility, structure, and organic matter content. It breaks pest and disease cycles. It causes the soil tilt to be better maintained. It causes soil water absorption to improve. And if legumes are used, especially what legumes are, it decreases the nitrogen fixation, which helps put back the nitrogen back into the soil, and the plant can acquire it. Soil tillability is improved, and moisture storing capacity of the soil is also improved. Looking at contour farming, another strategy which can be used. What essentially this is planting along contour lines of slopes, which helps reduce erosion on the hillsides. One of the major advantages of contour farming is that it improves irrigation systems and it conserves water. It keeps valuable topsoil in place on sloping lands, thereby preventing soil erosion. It slows down the water to settle in the soil. And what we mean by settle in the soil, what we simply mean is that it slows down the water for increased infiltration to take place, and as water entering the soil. It also prevents the formation of rills and gullies. And the last major advantage is that it prevents leaching of nutrients of nutrients into the soil. Another method what we could use is what is known as intercropping. And intercropping essentially is mixing crops such as in a strip cropping environment, which can provide nutrients and reduce erosion. At this point, we need to know two things, and there are two main types of intercropping. We have mixed intercropping, which is growing two or more crops at the same time with no distinct row arrangement. And then you have row intercropping, which is essentially growing two or more crops at the same time and one of more crops are planted in rows. One of the overall advantages of whether you use mixed crop intercropping or row intercropping is that it gives a higher income per unit area than slope cropping. The second one is that it acts as insurance against failure of crop in an abnormal year. So in case one crop fails, the farmer has another crop to depend on. One more advantage is that it maintains soil fertility as a nutrient uptake is made from both layers. And the last advantage, which I think is the most important advantage, is that it actually reduces the soil runoff. Looking at another strategy, which is known as terracing. And terracing is simply cutting stair steps or terraces, as we call it, into the land, and is the only way to farm extremely steep hillsides without causing massive erosion. For example, like in St. Vincent, they normally do this. It is a labor intensive to create, but has been a mainstay for centuries in preventing soil erosion, especially in the Himalayas and the Andes. So one of the advantages is that it reduces soil erosion. Again, it holds rainwater, which allows for the cultivation of water-intensive crops as well. Looking at another strategy, which is primarily practiced more in the developed countries, which is known as shelter belts. Shelter belts are simply rows of fast-growing trees around crop plantings, which provide windbreaks and also reduces soil erosion via wind. And again, it protects the soil from wind erosion. It also shelters the livestock and the crops. It captures water runoff and nutrients and improves irrigation efficiency. And it also filters and reduces the dust. Another technique, which is known as conservation tillage. No-till and reduced tillage farming leaves old crop residue on the ground instead of plowing it into the soil, and this covers the soil, keeping it in place. One major advantage is that it improves soil aggregation for roots to establish. It increases the organic matter, it increases soil biology and the soil microbiology. It reduces soil erosion by approximately 90%, and it improves water availability and reduces sediment loading. In addition to one of the other major advantages is that it reduces nutrient runoff into surrounding streams and rivers. Now, to prevent soil erosion from happening, looking at it in terms of what goes on in farm or what goes on in these big mega farms, we have certain conservation laws that are actually being enforced. And in the US, they have continued to pass soil conservation legislation in recent years. And just to give you some examples, you have like the Food Security Act of 1985, you have Conservation Reserve Program in 1985, the Freedom to Farm Act in 1996, and you have the Low Input Sustainable Agriculture Program in 1998. And internationally, the United Nations has introduced the FAR program in Asia. So coming to the conclusion, despite conservation successes. Soil is still being degraded at an unstable rate in the world, and we have to stop this in order for us to, to actually reap the rewards of using fertile soil to grow food for the world. Soil conservation programs need more research. We need education. We need much more funding and commitment from farmers and governments. We cannot just sit and say, yes, it's a problem. We need to address it. We need to have more commitment. We need more grants, more research money. We need to go out there and educate the public, the farmers. We need more commitment from farmers to be practicing the soil conservation techniques. And we also need the support from the government in terms of passing legislation and also providing a lot more extension services. In addition to, we also need better technology out there. This will incorporate together with the research and wider adoption of soil conservation to avoid an eventual food crisis. Thank you.